We are exercising our demons here on Locked On New York Rangers by counting down the worst 5 losses of the 2024-2025 season. We also explain why this should make us all look forward to next season.
You're Locked On the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1320 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, Jon Chik. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, and we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, as I just mentioned, this is going to be an episode where we exercise our demons, bid a not-so-fun farewell to the 2024-2025 New York Rangers season, a season that for me, and for a lot of you, I'm sure as well, was one of the most unfun, just disappointing, straight-up bad seasons in the history of this team. And they are entering their centennial, the 100th season of New York Ranger hockey this upcoming season. We can only hope it goes a lot better than this past one did. But with that said, let's go ahead and count down the 5 worst losses and kind of just get it all off our chests and move on and hope for better days ahead for the New York Rangers. We begin with number 5. This one might be a little bit surprising to see on this list, especially when you consider the way things went for this Ranger team this past season and how many just truly brutal losses there were and how many no-shows there were. But I'm actually going to go all the way back to November 23rd, a 6-2 loss on the road against the Edmonton Oilers. Now, on paper, it doesn't sound that bad. I mean, you never want to lose 6-2. I understand that. But you are on the road. You're playing the Edmonton Oilers. They're a team that is obviously a contender in the Cup final last year, currently competing in the Western Conference final this year. Superstar players, the whole 9 yards, right? So losing to them is not the kind of loss that's typically going to bother you that much. But here's why. And it's not even the lopsided score that's part of it, but that's not the main thing. This was the final game early in the season for the Rangers of a 4-game road trip. The Rangers, just the year before this past season, early in the season, had a 5-game road trip, and that saw them go 5-0. It was one of the real launching points of the Rangers that season. Of course, they go on to win the President's Trophy, and it just kind of gave you an idea that this was going to be a team that came out and battled every single night. At no point during that 5-game road trip last season were they satisfied. I mean, you could take a game off after you win the first 4, and I mean, hey, we won 4 out of 5. That's pretty good. I think if I remember correctly, they won the 5th one in overtime after a rally. So that was awesome. And this road trip, not so much. It started well enough. They started the 4-game road trip this season, with a 2-0 win at Seattle. Then they win 4-3 in Vancouver. Then they lose 3-2 in Calgary. And that kind of set the stage for this game. Now, the Ranger team that we all knew and loved from the year before this, they would have come out in this game like their heads were on fire, like their playoff lives were on the line, right? A little bit of an exaggeration, but not much of one. There would have been urgency. There would have been drive. These guys would have been fired up and ready to go. And they would have been hell-bent on making sure they won the last game of this road trip so that they could go home having won 3 games out of 4 on the road trip and feeling very good about themselves. 3 out of 4 wins on a road trip, that's a positive road trip by any measure. No guarantees that they would have won, but the effort would have been there. The effort, the drive, the competitiveness, the fire, it all would have been a heck of a lot better last season as opposed to what we saw this season. And that's not to say that this game here was the worst effort that we saw from the Rangers all season. Far from it. But it was one of those games where it felt like they were just kind of going through the motions. Whatever happens, and we'll go home and start fresh once we get back to Madison Square Garden. And the result was they pretty much got their butts kicked. They were down 4-0 in this game, went on to lose by a final score of 6-2. And again, you look at the road trip here, 2-2 again on a road trip, not a complete disaster, not like the sky is falling or anything like that on paper. But this game for me, and maybe for some of you as well, had just a very ominous feel to it. It just felt like something is off about this team. It was the first time I can remember feeling that way about the Rangers this season. And even after this loss occurred, they were still 12-6-1. Again, there are far worse things than that as far as, teams and how they start a season. But something just felt off. It just felt like this was a team that didn't have the same drive. They didn't have that same unity. They didn't have that same level of accountability that they had the season before. And for anybody that felt this way, obviously we were correct because we saw what ended up happening this season. Another fun fact about this game, this is also the game that led directly to the memo that Chris Drury sent out. Or maybe it didn't lead directly to it, but I guess you could say it was the straw that broke the camel's back. It was not more than a day or two after this that Chris Drury sent out the memo that the Rangers were open for business, that they were looking to deal, and that two of their long-tenured players and their supposed leaders, Jacob Trouba and Chris Kreider, their names were at the top of the list. And it wasn't long after this that Jacob Trouba ended up getting traded. Just a really bad night for the Rangers in a game where they were just very lethargic, and it kind of set the stage for everything that we saw the rest of the season. Quick ends up giving up 6 goals on 40 shots. McDavid, it was one of those nights where he did anything that he felt like doing, and it's McDavid, but still, I mean, you got to try to put up some kind of resistance. Just not good, very ominous, and again, to me, this was the game that kind of set the stage for just how bad things were going to get this season for the Rangers. Not their worst performance or their worst effort, not by a long shot, but this was the game that you just kind of knew this is not going to go very well. It just, like I said, ominous is the right word for it. It felt very ominous. Number 4, we're going to go to a more recent loss. March 28th, a 5-4 overtime loss at the Ducks. The Rangers had a 5-3, or no, excuse me, they had a 4-2 lead in this game with less than 6 minutes to go. And the Ducks, obviously not a great team. They probably did a little bit better this past season than I think a lot of people were probably expecting. But even with that being the case, still a bottom 5 team in the Western Conference. And the Rangers were mostly in control of this game. Yet a Mika Zibanejad power play goal in the third period, just less than 5 minutes into the third period. That gave the Rangers the 4-2 lead. And you would think that based on how this game was going and how late we were getting into the season, how important every point was, and where the Rangers were in the playoff standings, that this was a game that they were going to lock down and close out emphatically, control this thing the rest of the way, get the 2 points, and move on. The Rangers were actually in a playoff spot when this game was being contested. They had a situation where they were up by 2 points on both Montreal and Columbus. Columbus had a couple of games in hand, but when you look at the standings, it had the Rangers as the second wild card. So this is obviously a massively important game. It's crunch time. You got to close this one out. And again, to compare it to the season before, the 2023-2024 Rangers, they closed this game out. No problem, no issues, no hope of a rally for Anaheim. But we are talking, unfortunately, about the 2024-2025 Rangers. And we know with this team, no lead is ever safe. The Rangers remained up by 2 goals in this game until less than 6 minutes remained. You get a goal by Gauthier. There was a turnover in the neutral zone by the Rangers, and then he ends up scoring on a rebound. You get the game-tying goal by Zellweger. Just awful here. The Rangers' power play ended. They got a late power play in this game. They didn't score, but that's not even close to being the biggest issue here. They forgot to defend the guy coming out of the box. I believe it was Gudas, if I'm not mistaken. And you get a 3-on-2 rush out of nowhere. The Rangers failed to defend the rush, and all 3 forwards that were on the ice, Lafreniere and Trocheck among them, failed to back check with the urgency that's needed. I mean, the back check wasn't good enough here for any situation in the game, but when you consider the fact that we're down to less than 2 minutes to go, and you're fighting for your playoff lives, and you got to win this game, and that's the effort that you get, just wasn't good enough, and they end up scoring. We go to overtime, and McTavish scores just 59 seconds in. I couldn't find the full overtime, looking through highlights and whatnot, but I think this might have been one of those situations where the Ducks won the opening faceoff and never gave up possession of the puck, if I'm remembering correctly. A situation where the Rangers are kind of scrambling in the defensive zone and just unable to get in any kind of position. Igor ended up like a mile out of his crease. He kind of had to, given the situation. And look, 3-on-3, it's not as easy to defend as 5-on-5 because there's so much open ice. But still, it did not look good. A couple of passes by the Ducks, and the puck is in the back of the net. Just a truly embarrassing loss. Again, considering where the Rangers were in the season, how badly they needed this win, and the fact that they were mostly in control up until about 5 or 6 minutes remained. They basically fell asleep at the very end of a must-win game. And that was, unfortunately, just par for the course for the Rangers this season. Speaking of which, there was another disastrous overtime loss. We've got that ranked at number 3. We'll get to that one in just a second. I'm wondering how hard or how easy it is for you guys to figure out what's going to be on this list, because as well as I do, there were a lot of bad losses this season, but we'll get to the one I'm talking about in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that is both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they are packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no shells variety. It is the perfect grab and go snack for those busy days, whether I'm at my desk, on the run, whatever I might be doing, just need a quick protein boost. It's always a great go-to snack. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are always an amazing classic favorite. No shell wonderful pistachios are the perfect grab and go snack. Whether you're running between meetings or dropping off the kids, wonderful pistachios are the snack that works just as hard as you do. So get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers. Got to give a big shout out, as always, to the everydayers. Going forward here, we're going to be doing some more NHL draft talk. That's only about a month away, maybe just north of a month, if I'm not mistaken. And definitely looking forward to that. We'll talk about the draft, some potential targets for the Rangers at number 12 if they keep the number 12 overall pick. We got some Stanley Cup playoff talk for you guys as well. And more free agent targets for the Rangers, and we'll also discuss the Rangers' in-house free agents and what they need to do to hang on to certain players. But we move ahead on this countdown to number 3. It is a 4-3 overtime loss in Ottawa against the Senators on March 3rd, sort of the bronze medal of shame here as we go through this list. Again, just another massively important game for the Rangers, given where they are in the standings, where we are in the season. It's starting to get late at this point. The Rangers have to make their move. They got to start winning some games if they're going to find a way to eke their way into the playoffs, which, of course, they did not do. But part of the reason why this one ranks ahead of the previous entry, the loss of the Ducks, you are competing against a Senators team here that you are directly in competition with. 2 fringe playoff teams. And what happens? The Rangers are mostly in control of this game, and you get another late game collapse. They had a 2-goal lead with less than 10 minutes to play. They gave it away. They end up losing in overtime. The Rangers had mostly played well in this one, defended well, at least by their own standards for this past season, and were opportunistic, took advantage of some situations, and, a game where you felt like they were mostly in control. But again, based on everything that we had seen for the previous 5 months or so, you're always kind of holding your breath. You're never really sure. You're never really all that confident at this point that the Rangers are home free and that they're definitely going to close this out. You'd still like to think that they're going to, and obviously here they did not. Basically, the wheels fall off. You've got Greg making it 3-2. This is on a scramble at the tail end of a power play. I mean, this one you can at least say the Senators earned the opportunity. The Rangers did a nice job killing off the majority of the power play. And then at the very end, you've got a scramble in front, and there was a battle for the puck and whatnot. Can't crush the Rangers for the Senators scoring here. This was a blue-collar goal for the Senators. But the goal that I can crush the Rangers for is the one that happened after this. This one happens with less than 3 minutes to go. It's scored by Amadio, and this was awful. This was everything wrong with the New York Rangers in 2024-2025. First of all, the whole thing gets set up by the Rangers losing a 50-50 puck along the half boards in the defensive zone. I know that's very shocking to hear that the Rangers did not win a 50-50, but it is true. That is what happened. And then you get a situation where the Senators are trying to get the puck to the front of the net. It's kind of bouncing all over the place. It's a little bit of a follow the bouncing puck kind of a play, but be that as it may, the Rangers did nothing to help themselves here. It's crunch time. Every Ranger on the ice here is basically just kind of half-heartedly reaching for the puck. You had Lafreniere tries to pick up the puck and skate away with it. That didn't work. The Senators kept possession. Panarin's reaching for it. Trocheck is reaching for it. Vakanainen is reaching for it. Nobody could make a play here. And nobody really seemed like they wanted to make a play. And again, this is the time when all the chips are down. You are playing a team that you are competing with for one of the final playoff spots in the Eastern Conference. You're fighting for your lives. And this is what you get. Again, similar to a situation in the previous entry in this list, this effort isn't acceptable at any point in the game, but the fact that you're under 3 minutes to go and you're trying to ward off this team, and this is what you get, this is the effort that you come up with, it's just completely unacceptable. And the Senators score, and we end up going into overtime. Now, first of all, going to overtime in this situation is already very unfortunate. Now, obviously, the Rangers can still win, and I'm still rooting for them to do that, as I'm sure many of you were as well, because it's a big 2 points if you get it. But you've already gift-wrapped the Senators, and credit to them for coming back, but you've already gift-wrapped the Senators a point that they should not have gotten. You should have been able to close out this game. You were up by 2 goals in complete control with less than 10 minutes to go. figure out a way to get the job done, get the 2 points, get it done in regulation. You get 2 points, the Senators get no points, and on we go. And unfortunately, that's not what happened. Overtime begins, and what a awful sequence this was for the Rangers. The Rangers actually had possession, but they nevertheless give up the game-winning goal just 33 seconds into the overtime. So you've got a situation here where JT Miller passes out of the defensive zone to Panarin. He's right around the red line, right around center ice along the boards there. Panarin sends it back to K'Andre Miller because he had a defender closing in on him and probably just, pass it back, keep possession of the puck. K'Andre Miller, inexplicably, tries to make this. He's under no pressure. He tries to make a quick one-touch pass across the ice in the defensive zone for JT Miller. He missed him by a mile. The puck was way, way behind Miller, the other Miller, JT. JT reaches back to try to corral the pass. He can't do it. The puck bounces off the boards, goes back to the center of the ice, and Tim Stützle picks it up. And at this point, the Raiders are just scrambling, trying to get into defensive position, but they're obviously in a horrible spot here, thanks in part to that just atrocious pass. You've got Stützle then passing to his right to Brady Tkachuk, and Tkachuk buries it, and the Senators win, and just one of the worst losses of the season. And another reason why this ranks so high on this list is this game really sent both of these teams in completely opposite directions. The Rangers essentially collapse after this. They followed up this loss with a 7-3 home loss against the Blue Jackets the very next day, another fringe playoff team, and they basically no-showed that one. Then they lost again to the Jets after that. So this was the start of a 3-game losing streak at a critical part of the season for the Rangers. And for the Senators, this launched them into the stratosphere. Did they lose after this, the rest of the regular season? For a while there were like 5 or 6 teams gunning for those 2 wildcard spots. The Senators caught fire right after this and basically buried everybody. And at that point, it was like 4 or 5 teams for 1 playoff spot. So this game, just tanked the Rangers. And again, it allowed the Senators to really catch fire and really obviously build off of that and make the playoffs fairly easily. The other aspect of this is that makes it so bad. Things were starting to get a little bit better for the Rangers. A little bit. They were 4-1-1 in their last 6 games coming into this one. And like I said, they had crept into that second wild card spot. So you were starting to talk yourself into believing that maybe there's a chance, and then you have a disastrous loss just like this. And then after the game, you've got Mika Zibanejad pointing out the fact that the Rangers at least got 1 point, and it just infuriates you. He's not wrong. I mean, yes, they did get a point, and if the Rangers were to have made the playoffs by 1 point, I mean, that counts toward that, right? But who wants to hear about that? You just blew it. You just collapsed against this team that you're neck and neck with. That's a 3-point swing. You should have won in regulation. You lost in overtime. Nobody wants to hear about, well, at least we got a point. And that's not exactly what he said, but the fact that he pointed that out at all just tells you everything you need to know about the Rangers' mindset this season. Carson Soucy scored in this game, and you lost anyway. Think about that. On to number 2, Rangers at Sabres, 8-2 loss on February 22nd. Okay, first of all, you lost 8-2 to the Sabres. Let's all just take a minute to let the reality of that situation set in, okay? That's bad enough in and of itself. But honestly, that's secondary as far as why this ranks so high on this list, to the very simple fact that this was the Rangers' first game after the Four Nations break. And this is what you come up with. You basically no-show, just play atrocious hockey, get run out of the rink by a team that is perennially one of the worst teams in the entire league. So that's awful. And the funny thing about this, too, is, and I wasn't the only one, but I threw out the idea going into the Four Nations break that, okay, you know what? Maybe this is good for the Rangers. It's been a tough season. They've clearly underachieved. There's some players that just aren't, living up to their own expectations, the expectations that the fans have for them. So maybe you get a little bit of a chance to push the reset button here. You get a little bit of a mental break if you're these players. Honestly, get away from the game for a little while. I don't have a problem with that. If you got 2 weeks off, take a little break. Do something that doesn't involve hockey. It's fine. But make sure that once the Four Nations break is over, that you're back and you're ready to rock and you're ready to, help with this late season playoff push that obviously never ended up happening. And they did anything but that. They were still on vacation in their minds, I think, when this game started, because not only was it an 8-2 loss, the Rangers were down 5-0. They were down 5-0 before the first period ended. This game is everything wrong with the Rangers last season. This is supposed to be your big push, your march to the playoffs. And you weren't even there. I mean, physically you were there. Mentally, clearly you were not there. Igor Shesterkin got pulled out of this game before the first period ended. He didn't get any help, but he was really bad in this game too. He allowed 5 goals and made 6 saves. I don't think that's a very good ratio. It's basically a coin flip, save or no save. And then what was even funnier about this, or sadder about this, depending on how you look at it, the Rangers in the second period did score 2 goals, and they cut the lead down to 5-2. Now, at no point here am I expecting them to come all the way back from this 5-0 deficit. But okay, maybe they're going to actually pull their heads out of their you-know-what and play some better hockey. We go to the third period. Sabres score 3 more goals. Rangers forget to defend. Rangers look like they'd rather be anywhere else in the world other than playing hockey. And again, this is your big comeback. This is your response after your 2-week break. And this is the kind of effort that you put forward and the kind of hockey that you play. Just absolutely atrocious. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but again, exercising demons. That's the theme of today's Locked On New York Rangers episode here. Believe it or not, there is one game that is actually worse than this, at least in my own very humble estimation. Some of you might remember I did a live show about this episode, or I did a live show episode about this game right after the game ended. We're going to get to that one in just a second. We'll also have a couple of very quick honorable mentions. Like I said, we'll get to that in just a second. Okay, let's go ahead and wrap up today's episode with the grand champion of atrocious performances for the New York Rangers this season. But like I mentioned just a second ago, a couple of honorable mentions. There's only one that I'm going to talk about at any kind of length here, just for a quick minute or two, and then I'll have a couple others that I throw out there as well. The one that I really wanted to get on this list and just didn't have a spot for it was the 5-4 loss at home against the Avalanche on January 26th. And it doesn't sound like that bad of a loss on paper, right? Colorado's a good team. I know they got knocked out in the first round this season, but they're always a good team. Won a Stanley Cup not too long ago. Superstar players on that team. And on top of that, the Rangers did something that they very rarely did this past season. They responded to adversity. They were down by 2 goals in the third period, came back and tied the game. Then they had a power play. And this power play was going to last for most of the rest of regulation. I think there were like 30 seconds or so when the power play ended. The power play was no good. Then it expired, and then you've got the Avalanche getting an odd man break odd man rush out of the power play ending. The guy jumps out of the penalty box and away they go. And you've got Lehkonen scoring with 15 seconds to go. So at the very least, when you got that power play and there's like 2:30 to go in the game, we should win the game. That's the bottom line. We should be winning this game. But at the very least, we'll get into overtime. We'll get a point, and then we'll hopefully get another point in the overtime period. They didn't even get that happening. And what really was rough about this is it ended the Rangers' 10-game point streak. And, on one hand, it can't go on forever, right? You're not going to keep winning and winning and winning, or at least getting a point in every single game. But they'd been 7-0-3. They were starting to make their push. And then this was just a total gut punch of a loss. And I used this word earlier, but a little bit of an ominous feeling when the Rangers lost this game. So that one just missed the cut. That would be number 6 if we were doing top 6. But some honorable mentions here. We'll go through chronologically. 2-1 loss at home against the Blackhawks on December 9th. A 2-0 loss at the Predators on December 17th. A 5-0 loss at the Devils on December 23rd. This is the last game before the Christmas break. And again, I think the Rangers were already on vacation in their minds before they took the ice that night. A 4-0 loss at the Devils on April 5th. This is the game where you pretty much knew it was over. I mean, you kind of knew before that, but that's what really ended it. And there were a whole bunch of other games I could have even added to the honorable mention list. The Rangers got absolutely destroyed by the Devils, the Canes, and the Caps on multiple instances this past season. I mean, they just could not even compete with those teams. So those are your honorable mentions. But for me, the grand champion of just brutal performances by the Rangers this season, number 1 on our list, Rangers at Flyers, a 3-1 loss on November 29th. When we did our top 5 best Ranger wins of the season episode, which I believe was like 2 episodes before this one, or 3 if I'm not mistaken, I didn't really know what I was going to put at number 1. I ended up putting a game against the Devils at number 1, the overtime win, the Sam Carrick overtime winner, the rally, the Rangers did come back in that game too. I think that was deserving of the number 1 pick, but it wasn't like an obvious number 1 pick. This to me, as soon as I knew I was doing this episode, that's number 1. I don't have anything to look up or research or anything like that. That's number 1. This was so bad. And as I mentioned a minute ago, I did a live episode after this game, basically just to tear this team to shreds in a way that I've never done on this podcast. What are we at here? 1,320 episodes. I've never gone off on them the way that I did there. But I just had to, it was cathartic for me. Hopefully it was cathartic for a lot of you guys as well. I've always wanted this to be the glass half full New York Ranger podcast, the positive Ranger podcast, the podcast that when these guys deserve it, will sometimes give them the benefit of the doubt. This team this past season made it very, very difficult to do that. And this game in particular made it impossible. If you came out of this game as a Ranger fan feeling anything other than anger, disgust, secondhand embarrassment, primal rage, then I don't know what game you watched. The most blindly positive Ranger fan on this planet could not have watched this game, felt in any way good about the way any of the players were playing, felt in any way good about the direction of this team, felt in any way good about the energy and intensity level of this team. Nothing salvageable from this game in the absolute slightest. The Rangers were absolutely comatose. It was like watching a bunch of zombies skating around the rink. I used this expression earlier to describe one of the other games. They were physically in the building, mentally somewhere else. I don't know where, but they were somewhere else. Not a single ounce of emotion or fight from this team in this game. The bench was silent. Nobody was talking to each other. Nobody looked like they had a single bleep to give for this game. This is also their 5th straight loss, so you've got that going for it. I mean, already, the tension, the frustration among Ranger fans is starting to build and build and build. But okay, we're against the Flyers. They're terrible too, so we should be able to win this game, right? And of course, they did not do that. And the other thing too that kind of makes this look bad, and I don't know if this is part of it or not. Honestly, I don't even care if this is part of it or not. It was the day after Thanksgiving, so did some of these guys overdo it a little bit the day before? That's at least possible. But whether they did or not, I'm not even sure which would be worse. If they overdid it, and this is why they played like that, or if they don't even have that as an excuse and they still played like that. I honestly don't know which one would be worse. But this is also when you started to realize, I think as a Ranger fan, that whatever this team had the previous season, gone. It has evaporated. The good vibes, the good feelings, the unity, the brotherhood, all the exciting wins, all the dramatic moments, all the playoff heroics, all of it has evaporated. There is nothing left. This team is a complete shell of what it once was. And at this point, I'm not going to give up on them eventually turning things around and eking their way into the playoffs. But everything that made this team special, the season before, gone. It has waved bye-bye, and it's probably not coming back. And as we all know, it never really did come back. There were certain stretches of the season that were quite a bit better than this one, obviously. I mentioned the 7-0-3 run not too long ago. After the trade deadline, they made a little bit of a run at it, got back into that second wild card spot for a day or two, whatever it was. But this is when it became very obvious that the 2023-2024 Rangers were gone. And even in a season with so many rough losses, no shows, low effort games, low energy games, no other contenders for the top spot. This had to be number one, the grand champion of brutal New York Ranger performances. The fact that they were even in this game at the end of it is absolutely insane. And I think that has more to do with their opponent than the Rangers themselves. But even when you watch the goal that the Rangers scored in this game, okay, the Rangers are down 2-0. It's about midway through the second period. And Trocheck scores a goal that cuts the lead down to 2-1. I went back and watched the replay for this. Even in the build up to this goal, it's not like we were seeing guys skating all over and working hard to make things happen and making all these great passes. The goal kind of came from out of nowhere. I mean, it was a decent pass. I think it was Keandre Miller that sent it to Trocheck in the high slot area, and he shot and scored. But you watch the aftermath of the goal being scored here, and these guys yeah, they go over to each other on the ice, but nobody's talking, nobody's looking at each other. There's no chatter, there's no fist pump, there's no let's go. Watching them, it looked like it physically hurt them to celebrate this goal. And they continue to just kind of meander along, drift around the ice for the rest of the game. They get it to the end of the third period. They're still down 2-1. They pull their goalie, and the Flyers finally put them out of their misery for an empty netter. And again, to me, it wasn't even close as far as what was going to be number one on this list. Let me also say, though, that I hope by doing this is cathartic. Like I said, the term I used earlier was we're going to exercise our demons together, take one last final parting shot at this tremendously disappointing New York Rangers season. And now we move on, and now we turn the page. And hopefully a season like this in some ways makes you look forward to next season that much more. And that could go either way. On one hand, maybe you don't think there's any hope for next season. On the other hand, though, I propose the question, how could things be any worse than this past season? At the very least, the effort has got to be better next season than it was this season. I think almost by default, the amount of no shows that this team came up with this season was insane. There's no way that can happen next season. Not with Mike Sullivan as the coach. I do have some hope that at the very least he will keep these guys honest, from an effort perspective. But it's over. It's done with. We can move on. And as I mentioned, I do look forward to next season after such a disappointing season this year. And we will get back to this being the Positive Ranger podcast and looking forward and being hopeful for the future and hoping that this team can get back into contention next season. That's definitely on the horizon. But like I said, we're still kind of performing an autopsy on 2024, 2025. And we hope the next season is a heck of a lot better. We'll call it there. If you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @jchik17. Once again, that is @jchik17. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.